Right, PowerPoint would be the magic. Can you see them online so they can have their, at least their head nodding and? Okay, perfect. So we'll get started and we'll wing it and we'll make it happen and so as long as the online people, just for your sake online, there's going to be 5 words throughout the slideshow. Y'all can shout it out in here if you want, you know, but they'll be in red. And you're monitoring it online, so I'll just wait for it after. When we have a second, I'll throw my email in there that you can send those 5 words to after. Has everybody here signed the roster? Write better than I do, and you'll make me a happy girl.
No problem.
I'm the world's worst writer, so that's fine. And for those of you online, if you have any questions, I mean, do all this so we can see it. Throw something in chat, we'll get it to happen. So just by way of introduction, my name is Atkin. I own MethMob, and a lot of the information comes from 4 main sources on this class. So we've decontaminated over 2,000 houses in Utah. So a lot is just percentages in my company. A lot from the health department, a lot from Jewish Institute, which does a lot of testing on third-hand meth, because that's really what we're talking about in the real estate world is third-hand meth. And our state standard in Utah for required decontamination. We're not going to get in the weeds a lot by additional rules from the local health department, because some of the local health departments, they're in charge of administrating the rule, and some of them have put in additional regulations. So we won't get in the weeds too much in that, but that is where this information comes from. I always have 3 requests and kind of a permission, I guess. One thing I'd like you to do is not leave scared from this class. I am not a scared the crap out of you with meth. I just want to give you good information. My goal is to keep your deal together. And invariably, it's easy to go down the rabbit trail. And so I'm just not a fear factor person. I might rein it back in if it starts getting too much that way. Second thing is I want you to have a couple tools in your realtor tool belt you can pull out when meth comes up. Because when it comes up in a transaction, it can get dicey. So nobody leaves scared. Couple tools in your tool belt. Don't make me be the talking head up here. If you have questions on meth, we can keep it like Vegas, keep it right here. But I want to answer all your questions. I want you to feel comfortable with it in a good way that you can handle it when it comes up. So please ask questions. Same thing on Zoom. Throw it in chat, wave your hands. You'll let me know if I need to stop or anything like that. So don't leave without your questions being answered for sure. And then my request permission is trust I have no intention to offend anybody. But I'm going to tell the truth. And sometimes that gets a little dicey, right? Like I might say something like, we're cheap as hell in Utah. That's my truth. And I think sometimes people, no, and it's not everybody, but in general, in Utah, we have a culture that I love way more than I hate it. So I don't want anybody to read anything wrong into the culture. I'm originally from St. George, not the metropolis that it is today, but I lived on 700 South and it was the end of town. The dairy was behind us. But I've lived here in Provo-Orem area for 45 years, so I'm Utah born and bred. And your clients are my clients, and we have a culture here. So I just want to talk about it and not pretend that it fits every single person, but in general, you know what I'm talking about. So just trust I have no intention to offend. Is that okay? So with that, we'll carry on. Everything good on the Zoom chat? Perfect. All right. You can go to the next slide, I think. Gosh, this must be one I'm working off of because it's got my little green mucky mucks. You guys up for a pop quiz? Test your math knowledge. All right. It's easy. It's 50-50 chance, and they're all true false. So it's going to be a little, because these aren't going to pop up where they're in PDF. So go ahead and go to the next slide, but maybe you can keep it so it only shows the first question. I don't know. There you go. Keep going just a titch more. You guys can get ahead of the game too, and that's okay. But true or false, Meth only exists in West Valley, poor and uneducated areas. Yeah, completely false. Now, I think that they get a bad rap. I hear all the time, well, it's in West Valley, it's in Kearns. Of course, I'm going to do a meth test. Or Ogden, Kearns, and West Valley always get the bad rap. I can tell you this from my experience, by far, they're way nicer houses. In fact, let me ask this, and you keep an eyeball on the chat. How many of you have had a meth house so far in your real estate world?
Yeah.
Right, that you know of, that you're testing for. Okay, 3 of you. Anybody online?
I asked them.
Okay, perfect. Buy, sell, or buy side? Buying agent? Okay, so you're testing. You're having your home inspector test. Listing side? Okay, you got caught.
Yeah.
And it's not you in general, but it's kind of sucky and it's always surprising. So let me ask this, and I'm going to use a little bit of slang, but you'll know what I mean, because we have, every town has the east side and the west side, right? I live in Provo where we don't do drugs at all, but
Not on Sunday.
only on Sunday, right? To get through church, but there's a general thought of, if it was in Provo, it'd only be in the Boulders. It would never be up on the east side where all the pretty people live, right? And I think in general, it's easy for us to believe that good people don't do drugs.
Right.
If you were raised at all like me, and this was the way I was raised in St. George, good people don't do drugs or drink coffee or smoke, or we had zero diversity when I was growing up. So I wasn't taught any diversity training. We were all white Mormons. It's just the way it was. But the way I was taught is only the hippies did drugs. And we were a cowboy family, so it was the hippies that did the drugs. And whatever version of it that you grew up with, it's easy to believe that good people don't do drugs. And meth has a very interesting demographic. Because it is a working person's drug, it gives you energy, it makes you feel great, it kills the pain. It is the secondary drug for so many prescription medicines that do work. And then when your doctor cuts you off, you go to, because you still need that help, your back still hurts, you still need energy. So does anybody know who the #1 user of meth is in Utah today? #1.
I have a
Guess.
stay-at-home mom.
Yeah. White moms, #1 user of meth in Utah. #2 user? Construction workers. There's 2 rising. So with that alone, I would go test every house every time.
Mhm.
What house hasn't had a mom in it? You know, that only leaves the college dorms. We know college kids are never experimenting with drugs. So you got #1 user, white mom, construction workers. 2 rising demographics in Utah, the Hispanic population and the older generation. And I have a hypothesis on why that is based upon what I know about meth. And I kind of told you all what meth does is it's a drug that's manufactured out of nothing but poison. So don't think this is a drug class in your real estate world. It's contamination in houses because it's made out of nothing but carcinogens. So it's concocted into this out of these crazy chemicals. But what it does when you're using meth is meth produces dopamine, and our bodies produce a natural, normal amount of dopamine that will get you through the next 2 hours, right? You go, CE sucks, and I acknowledge that. But your natural amount of dopamine just gets you through the day, and life's pretty good. And we have first world problems here. they're just first world, and if you hit a dog on the way to work, it's a rough day. But normally we just operate with this normal amount of dopamine that keeps us feeling pretty decent. And then every now and again, and you probably have these days that are tens, they're just, yes, you close your first $1 million house. Remember that day where you're like, or your kid graduates from high school, maybe the day you got married, maybe the day you got divorced. I don't know, right? Everybody in here's had a few 10 days in their life, true? And then your head hits the pillow that night and you wake up and you're just back to normal. You can't even recreate that yumminess of yesterday. And then the flip side of that is we've all had a negative 10-day too, right? Death in the family, you lose your $1 million deal at the closing table, whatever. We've all had those days. They're just like, holy shit, get me out of this day. Let my head hit the pillow, because tomorrow I'll feel a lot better. So all of that is part of dopamine. And when somebody is using meth, they don't go to 10 times 10. Their brains produce so much dopamine. It's like 10 times 10, that awesome. And whoever was saying in here to get through the week, it gives you so much energy. And there are functioning meth users in Utah. I have absolutely no doubt. But you have all this energy. Then when that high wears off, and we get highs from every piece of food we eat, right? Our bodies just take whatever we give it, take the good, kick out the bad. Getting that back there. So when a meth users is coming off that high of 10 times 10 over here where they're rocking it, they don't go back to just normal amount of dopamine. A meth user's brain actually stops producing dopamine. So that is why it is so hard to quit meth. The recidivism rate of a meth user every time they quit is 85% go back. Because guess where they are?
There's no natural dopamine.
No natural, so you're over here in despair. So I actually have a lot of empathy for a meth user today that I had no clue that even really existed. I haven't had meth hit my family, but I have a lot of empathy now going, holy crap, that's the hardest thing they'll ever do in their whole life. Yeah.
Drugs and dopamine, it takes 9 months for your brain to start producing dopamine normally. You know, so it's like,
can you imagine 90 bad days?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why they go
I'm gonna grab water. It's crazy. Yeah. And the research on meth is it changes their brains enough, and maybe yours is meth or just drugs in general, but the research on meth is 3 years. 3 years. Can you imagine 1,000 bad days that you're going, I really want to stay on the wagon. I really want to take care of my kids. I really want to do my job. And then you're over here in despair, fighting the despair. So again, not that this is a drug class, but I want you to think back on, based upon what you know now with the user, to convert it to real estate. When you're thinking of what houses to test, I think most of our clients and a lot of realtors go, why would I ever test this nice house? It's beautiful. And it is, and the people are great. But most of the clients that I'm doing work for, this is their story. Holy crap, are you kidding me? My spouse, my kid, they've helped somebody out. It's not the owners that are in there smoking meth, waiting for you to come and sell their property. They've helped somebody out. The health department says for each person who is homeless or in rehab as a result of meth, they've contaminated 20 houses in their history. 20
for one person.
One person. Now, when I first heard that, I'm not somebody that's swayed a lot by, yeah, I'm like, you can, the statistics are this, that, and the other.
Because you can.
So I'm like, yeah, that's pretty high.
Yes.
I mean, your reaction was exactly when I heard that from the health department. I'm like, whatever. Now I look back after 8 years and I hear the stories from, because I'm dealing with the sellers on the phone, and their first call generally is, holy crap, there's no way. Home inspector's done something wrong. The lab's done something wrong. There's no way.
There's denial that
There's meth
any
in my
meth
house.
contamination.
Because they're thinking, I would know if Breaking Bad were in my basement. Wouldn't we all know that? That's what people think about meth, is a meth lab. Because there was a lot of news and hype about meth labs, which they're not good, but that's not what's contaminating our houses in Utah today. It is meth use. Somebody smoking meth creates that vapor. So when you're cooking meth, it creates a vapor. When you're smoking meth, it creates a vapor, but it's smaller. And kind of an example, this is sleazy and Atkin comparison, but you'll kind of get where I'm coming from. Would anybody take a quick bath, 55-gallon drum of gasoline for $500, $1,000? If the money's right? Everybody's got their price.
Yeah,
But it's
go
kind of offensive to your senses. You're like, are you crazy, Ann? Now, how many of you have rinsed off your hands with gasoline to get the paint or sticky off? How many of you sniff gas at the gas pump? It is the exact same product, but one is a lot more acute than the other. Can we agree to that?
Mm-hmm.
Same product, but one you just go, there is no way. And I literally, I use that scenario in my class all the time, and I literally washed my hands with gas in my garage 2 weekends ago with something. I can't even remember what I had on there. And I don't think twice about it. It's the same product. So smoking, you're going to have lower numbers. Cooking, you're going to have higher numbers, but it is the exact same third-hand meth that's left behind. So when I'm talking to these sellers, they're thinking something's not right because I know there's not been a lab in my house. Then by the next day, when I'm having conversations with them, almost always it is, my piece of crap spouse, I divorced him 6 years ago, the gift that keeps on giving. I had one client that we decontaminated his house, and we had to test every level because he wanted to know where it's coming from. And his kid is like 28 years old with grandkids, and he wants to kill his kid because he had a rough teenage years. They know exactly where that meth came from. In general, that is what happens. Those are the conversations I have. They know right where that meth has come from, and they've helped somebody out. And when you are on the buying end of a house, you have no idea who they've helped out. Zero.
So
Right?
they look nice upstairs.
In fact, for you three that had the meth houses, it was you three only, right? If I were to use my snide and Atkin judgment, so just roll with me, were they really nice houses, or no kidding, I was not surprised at all. There was meth in this house. Nice, nice,
I wasn't that surprised.
no surprise. Okay,
I mean, I knew up front, actually.
there was something going down.
Yeah.
So
But two were nice.
that's 66% of this room, right?
And the inspector said, it was such a small amount, it was only in this one corner. He said, so literally, it had to have been somebody smoked something once. And it was still there.
Yeah.
But because it was there, they had to decontaminate the entire house at 3 feet.
For
It's-
once?
Well, sometimes it's hard to know.
Yeah, like.
I hear a lot of weird things.
Yeah.
How's that? You guys do too, right? Sometimes when your clients are talking and you're like, I'm just gonna go with this, but
They know, or if it's construction worker building.
you don't.
Yes.
You don't.
Yes.
Keep this in mind, a home inspector's role is simply to go, is there meth here, is there not? Right? And you'll hear me say a lot in the next 2 hours, test every house every time. Because there is not a house I wouldn't test. And there
They're
are
saying new construction because it's the construction workers.
new
that are-
construction, I'm a fan of test it. It's generally, just for the sake of this class, I'm gonna give you percentages. Like they're not a high percentage house that'll test positive. The majority of my houses that we decontaminate are not new construction. But test it, because it's in there. Generally, when we find it in new construction, it's under the legal limit because it is one sub. And I go, if I was a sub, I'd go smoke it out in the porta potty or my truck before I walked into work. That's me. But most of the time in new construction, when it's there, and we go in and we'll test all the rooms, right? Because the new buyer's like, I don't want some, I want none. They're freaked out.
Right.
So we go in and test all the rooms. Almost always it's in that great room, front room, kitchen, you know, the big area with no window coverings. God and everybody can see them. That's the room that's contaminated. It's the weirdest thing in new
Really?
construction. Yeah, so test new construction, but it's low percentage houses. The higher percentage houses, obviously, the longer the house has been in existence, the more people can migrate through there, right? That I helped my brother out 6 years ago, or whatever it is. But when I think back to the one in the 20 contaminated houses, in fact, let me ask you this by raise of hands. How many of you know somebody or love somebody, or it could be both, know and love, that either has gone through rehab, needs to go through rehab, is in rehab? Okay, so everybody in this room, which is not, it's epidemic out there. So I'm probably not giving you new information when I tell you this is what users do. They do really good and then they fall off the wagon. And then you have the heartbreak going, please get back on the wagon. And then they do really, really good. And then they fall off the wagon. And then they do really, and that is the addiction cycle. It's horrible, it's heartbreaking. I literally have the easiest part of meth. The cleanup is simple. It's done, right? But I go, a user does this. So when I think about 20 houses, I have a nephew that if you would have asked me if I knew anybody who did meth 9 years ago, I would have said no. That was my total truth. Now I look at my nephew and I love him to pieces, and he has struggled with drugs for decades. And he's done meth and he's doing great now. He's on the wagon.
How old is
He's probably 45. And so I go, my sister-in-law's beautiful 3 houses that she's lived in, for sure. And then throughout his, teenage years, then he got married, got divorced, had rentals, they owned houses. I can't name 20 houses, but I go, there's easy 20 houses in his process. Because after mom, dad, brothers, sisters, family, friends, coworkers kick you out before you're homeless, you're doing all sorts of things. Or it's just, can I stay with you for a couple weeks? My wife kicked me out and my rental will be ready. I can move in December 1st, but what's today? I just need 10 days. You help a girl out? I know you have an extra 3 rooms. I just need 1. That's all it takes.
So he did that 20 times.
Or the houses that he lived in. And there may be some houses that you never smoke meth in. I don't know. I just know this. Out of all the phone calls I get at MethMob, most everybody knows where their meth has come from. And it's not the person I'm talking to on the phone that's going, holy crap, I can see my equity dripping away. Because it's painful.
Did you help him out to become in your house?
Yeah, I tested my house.
I was going to say.
He tested all my rentals. I'm like, I was a freak in the beginning. And well, I'm still kind of a freak, but yeah, I just go, it doesn't mean they contaminate every house they go into.
Right.
It doesn't. But I'm telling you, there are enough people that tell me, oh my gosh, 3 years ago. And I'll tell you this happens at least once a week with at least one of my clients. There's no exception to this rule ever. Somebody is always going, crap, I didn't test 2 years ago and I bought. I didn't test 5 years ago and I bought. Now I'm stuck with the bill. I sell that every single week in my company. And for that one, I go, it kind of stinks because I think as buyers, in fact, I can remember selling one of my rentals in Murray. It was about 9 or 10 years ago. And I'm kind of a lazy landlord. I live in Provo. My rentals go from about a mile from here, Lehigh to Spanish Fork. So I had this one Murray property that I had a long time, and I'm like, whenever they move out, I'm buying another down here. So I sold it, bought a house. I called my agent, and I'm like, who's the best home inspector? Because I don't know that much about how. She gives me 3, and I'm like, dude, you're killing me. Just give me the best, right? Don't torture me like that. Tell me the best. And he calls me up, and he's like, you want MethMob right on with your home inspection? I'm like, no. Do my freaking home inspection. I didn't know any. I know about mold, right? You squirt Clorox on, but I know about the meth shed. It's in the backyard. And radon, I didn't know anything about. So it was super duper easy for me to go, no, just give me a home inspection. But I think I'm pretty normal. Well, I know I'm not too. I know that other side of me that's not. But I go, do you think there's plenty of our clients, our buyers that go, that you even have to fight to get them to pay for a home inspection, let alone the other stuff?
Yes.
And I believe they look at a house and go, why on earth would I test this nice house? Am I retarded? I would know if Breaking Bad were right in front of me. This is a beautiful house. These people look awesome. Why would you waste my money? I know what a meth. I've seen Breaking Bad. They're thinking that. I promise you, they're thinking that. Don't waste their money. Don't waste their intelligence. There are plenty of people, especially those people that go, there is no way it happened on my watch, but I know I didn't do a test. I know I didn't, and I wished I would have now, but I would have never guessed in this house. Never guessed in this house. So when I go test every house every time, trust, I know you will have clients that will go, no. If you're using the UAR forms and you say nothing about a meth test, you're legally protected because it says in the forms do a meth test, the Utah forms, because we do a ton of meth here. My hope is after this 2-hour class, you'll have a few hours of, or a few conversations that you can pull out of your tool belt that won't offend them when you ask them to take a meth test or insult their intelligence or make them think you're only taking them to scuzzy houses in the scuzzy neighborhood and they're too good for that. Because that's our real world, right? And I know everybody isn't the same, and you get what you pay for in this class, 0, my Atkin opinion, but let's not pretend that Presidio is anything less than a prestigious agency. If they're coming to Presidio, there's a reason, right? If they want the 1% broker that will do nothing and just get it on the market, that's not you guys. The clients that a reputable brokerage is going to have, they know that if it's a scuzzy house and they were going to fix and flip it, I wouldn't be surprised if there was meth. But in general, we don't talk about meth. We don't talk about use. We don't talk about addicts. We don't talk about problems. And it's easy to judge a house and go, this thing is gorgeous. And I think an easy conversation for, I don't know, maybe 80% of the buyers is when you go out, you guys go out the last 30 minutes of your home inspection with the home inspector, meet with your clients, go through everything. That might be a great time to go, did you happen to do a meth test? And you'd go, why would I do this beautiful house? And constant reassurance from you. Oh my gosh, I'd be surprised if we found it here. True? House looks great, people look great, or however you say that to legally protect yourself, but reassuring them, be surprised if we find it here, everything looks great, but when you call me up in 5 years to sell this, we don't want to find it then. Then it's not about meth, it's about protecting your client. So it kind of takes away the weirdness of, you need to open your wallet a little bit and pay your home inspector to do a meth test. Because we suspect every house. But that's the truth.
And then you start talking to once they buy and sign the paperwork. And then it's like selling out at you that you didn't even suggest that, you know,
Mhm.
oh, we're.
And I get those calls too, right? It's like, why didn't they tell me? You have a due diligence. Now I know what I know, right? I know a lot about the real estate world. Cause I have people, I'm gonna sue my agent. I'm like, good luck.
Makes so much sense. I have enormously wealthy friends with huge homes and they're resenting them because a relative will say just the same thing you said. You've got tons of extra space. I just need to stay in your basement for a while.
We just finished a house last month. It was almost 9,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And 4 furnace systems.
Uh-huh.
It was beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. And generally, it'll stay confined to 1 furnace system, right? If you got the and I'm just blaming rotten kid in the basement. It
Right.
doesn't,
Right.
which flies in the face of our #1 user, right? The white mom.
Right.
But that one still kind of creeps me out.
Yes.
I believe it, I just can't embrace it. So, if, where was I going with that train of thought? I'm licking too many meth walls. I can't remember where I was going with that train of thought. Nice house. Oh, generally it stays confined to 1 furnace system. And so we had this big house, 4 furnace systems. And actually I had the buying agent and the listing agent both call me and go, give me an estimate to decontaminate this house. Cause I've worked with both of them before. And I'm like, I'm not giving you an estimate to
What
decontaminate.
city?
And I'm not even saying a 9,000 square foot house. We're gonna go in and do some individual testing because it's probably not throughout the house. I mean, if you've got a user, they're probably not in all the rooms doing all the crazy stuff. And it just happened that 3 of the systems were just barely over, not too high over, but they needed decontaminating the kitchen. So I'm telling you, I swear, I think meth users do what we do with coffee in the morning. Go up to the kitchen table.
In the kitchen?
The kitchen, and then the whole basement that they lived in.
So 3 out of 4 furnace systems.
All 4 furnace systems were over the legal limit, but the downstairs and just the kitchen. But yay, I didn't have to decontaminate a whole house that didn't need a whole decontamination. Like you were saying, if it's only in 1 area, let's find it. If it's a high enough number, it doesn't make sense to do a lot of pre-testing because I'm wasting your client's money. But in some cases, it makes sense to spend a little money pre-testing if it'll save some torture on the house. At the end of the day, I want a house safe. So it just depends. How's that? It's like in real estate. If I tell you I've lived in my house 35 years, I build it new, I'm off Carterville Road in Provo, 2,700 square feet, how much is it worth? Depends on about 5 billion other things, right? So that's math.
Somebody online assess what is the legal limit? Or the.
No, that's an awesome question. So and it'll be one of our questions here too in red. Eventually we will get to all this and I'm okay with that. State standard for required decontamination is 1 microgram per 100 square centimeters. That just sounds dicey. You don't even know what that means, do you? I go, what it looks like on paper is $1, 1.00. 100 micrograms is about a 4-inch by 4-inch template that the lab will give you, and it's a legal area. So you can have about $1 worth of meth in a 4-inch by 4-inch square. And I always put it in dollar format with our clients because they can wrap their brain around $1. They can't around, in fact, just yesterday, I had an agent send me a test and it came back at 0.11 micrograms per 100 square centimeters, which means zip. And then I can go, that's like comparing 11 cents to $1. Go live your best life. You don't need me. Does 11 cents to $1 go, oh my gosh, I'm not even close to the limit. It's a little bit easier to, so put it in dollar format. That's what I do with your clients, but it's 1 microgram per 100 square centimeters. This house that we did that had the 4 furnace systems, the furnace systems range between like 1.3 and 2.8, pretty small, except the downstairs one, 200 times over the legal limit. So yeah, they were having a party down there apparently, and still didn't look like Breaking Bad. Well, I'm going to have a test. So hang tight. I'm going to have a test sample up here and I'll explain what it is. But when you get that report back from ALS Labs, it's gonna have some numbers on there. 1.2, 16, 5.9, 200, whatever it is. Look at those numbers like you're reading dollars. And I do that for the sake of, I'm always trying to calm down a transaction. By the time they get to me, it's ugly. They're freaking out. The buyers are like, I'm out, let's go find another house. The sellers are freaking out. So I'm trying to calm it down. And honestly, putting it in dollar format for your clients eases the tension a ton. The next thing that eases the tension a ton is when you can educate them and go, it's not a meth lab, which is our second question. Utah does not have any active meth labs. We don't. So whatever you're thinking inside your soul, and there's probably small batch cooking going on while I'm teaching this class, little teeny shake and bake bottles, but it's super hard to get your hands on precursor chemicals to cook meth. And if you look at any of the meth news that comes across now, or you talk to any of your police officer friends or family and ask them where we're getting our meth in Utah, we're shipping it in from Mexico. It's always 10 pounds found in a car, 25 pounds found in a car. That's the meth news today. But when meth comes up in a transaction, the sellers are like, I'm not buying the meth lab in the neighborhood. Sorry, the buyers. And the sellers are like, I would know if Breaking Bad were in my basement, because everybody goes to lab. It's almost like peanut butter and jelly. It's just natural. So put it in dollar format and let them know this is not a cooking house. Looks like, this is the nicest words I've come up with so far. It looks like meth has been introduced into that house at some point. Let's get it taken care of. It's a smoking number. I have plenty of people that, oh my gosh, this has got to be a cooking number. No, maybe my downstairs basement, the bathroom, he was doing small batch cooking. Because when we pre-tested, this bathroom was 2,500 times over the legal limit. That's probably what caused the furnace to be at 200. But the bedrooms on either side were like 50 and 75. The bathroom downstairs was where all the action was in this house, besides the kitchen upstairs. You gotta have the right kind of coffee and you won't need meth. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and then we're just leave, so.
But she's like, there's rarely curtains in the kitchen, like you.
Well, in new construction. Meth users do not think.
Oh, that's,
Their brains really change.
yes, that's.
And so here's your best sign for what does a meth house look like. First test every house every time. But when you see weird in a house, and you see weird all the time, doesn't always mean meth, but meth users do the weirdest things, I have decided.
Like what?
Smoke meth at the, why is grandma's, so grandma, grandpa houses, they're hotbeds.
Yes,
There's no time I don't have at least 2 going on.
yes.
And sometimes we pre-test the house, you know, if grandma's like, there's no way, Chuck was only in the basement, go test that one. My upstairs will be fine. And we go pre-test. You know what's usually the hottest rooms in grandma's houses?
Kitchen, bathroom.
Grandma's bathroom. What kind of creep waits for grandma to go to the doctor? I know it's not grandma. We all know it's thug in the basement.
And the kitchen and the bathroom.
That's weird. I see weird stuff.
Yeah.
You guys see weird stuff. It doesn't mean they're all meth houses, but you know, in fact, on your last 30 minutes, when you're going out on that home inspection, after this class, you might see some things that you go, woo, that might remind you, you don't need to point out the weird to your clients. They don't need to know that. It's just, now you had them do a meth test, right? No, why would I do that? They're expensive. And this house is beautiful. Be surprised if we find it here. House looks great. People look great. But when you call me up in 5 years, let's don't find it then. Then it's not even about the neighborhood, the community, the meth. You've just diffused it all. And you will have some clients that if you bring up meth, they will drop you like a hot potato. So I don't want to sit up here on my holy seat and think this is an easy conversation, because it's not sometimes. But if we can make it not about judgment, which we're pretty good at in Utah, right?
Really?
I know, we do judgment and perfection hardcore here. And so sometimes it's really hard to just say the truth. We have a lot of meth houses in Utah. A national statistic is that 1 in 10 houses have meth in it. National. Our most recent survey from the government, no matter how you feel about the government, it's going to be fairly close, right? Our last survey, so 2022's information in Utah, we're number 7 per capita in meth use in Utah. Number 7. So if a national average is 1 in 10, it's safe to say we're higher than that in Utah. And in fact, what home inspectors do you guys use? Pillar to post. Jared does meth testing. Who else? On-site does 360. A1. All of those guys do meth testing. All of them do. Depending upon who I'm talking to, they'll tell me between about 1 in 3 tests to 1 in 10. I think probably we have, I don't know, maybe, and who knows, it's all opinion, right? Because I don't believe they test every house. They test the ones that the clients will pay for. And we all are using our judgment going, well, yeah, this ratty, nasty, stinky house, of course I'll meth test, versus yeah, I never do work in Alpine, because we know they would never do that there, right? But that's a normal thought for in general. I know I'm generalizing it, but can you believe that goes through a lot of people's minds? It does. Meth is a tricky one. We all know somebody, but we don't know any meth houses. And then it's like, oh, I'd rather have my grandkids living in any house we've decontaminated than do an Easter egg hunt at anybody's house.
Our children went to Lone Peak High School in Highland. Everyone said, go to Alpine. That was
A nice place to live. There's nothing wrong with it. But meth doesn't care about city lines,
no, it's
wages. It is a working person's drug.
yes.
And I think the fact that those 2 rising demographics, this is what I make up about meth use. Because, and I can kind of see why we're number 7. You know, we're number 1 in prescription drug misuse in Utah. A lot of our shadow side, number 1 things, that's what I call, is kind of that yucky side of Utah. And I love it more than I hate it. So, right, don't get me wrong. But the bad things we're number 1 in: prescription drug misuse, plastic surgery, pornography, antidepressant medicine, teen suicide. I think those kind of root back to perfectionism and judgment, and I'm not good enough. Right? And if any of you know meth users, very likely their beginning point wasn't, hey, let's go party Friday and shoot up a little meth. It was, I started out on painkillers. My doctor cut me off. Well, guess what? My back still hurts. I still got to pay for my kids' soccer, piano lessons. They're on a competition team. I can't not go lay cement today. I can't not go to work today. I need those pain pills for my back. And they can be functioning. Guess what? I'm a fan of pain pills. I've had my knees replaced. They have their place. Antidepressant medicine has its place. Most prescriptions have a good use. They just, we tend to lean on them here because we aren't taught in Utah very well that it's okay that we're a piece of shit someday, that we blow it someday. That's not acceptable in our culture, which is why I think our suicide rate is so tough. And guess what? We aren't at our best every single day. We're at our best most of the time. And so when your doctor cuts you off of whatever it is you still need that help, whatever it was. Most meth users started on prescription pills of some sort, whether it's antidepressant medicine, opioids, because meth kills the pain. So your back doesn't hurt anymore, gives you tons of energy, makes you feel awesome. And when you're feeling a little bit less than because your kid didn't get Sterling Scholar this year, meth makes you feel great. And that sounds terrible. It sounds like I'm blaming all the good people, and I'm not. We all have our crutches. Mine's a cranberry vodka one. Pick that one before you pick meth. But it's super duper prevalent. And when it creates that much dopamine, it's hard to have anything that compares to that great. And we're all arrogant enough to go, I got control of whatever I put in my body. I can control it. So when you're thinking about what house should I have my clients test for meth, seriously, every house is in my radar because we don't know who they've helped out.
Do they ever come back after the 3 years to a regular amount of natural dopamine after going off?
Yeah, I think that they do, and everybody's a little bit different too, right? We all have different genetics, and so I'm sure some people that can quit it fairly easy.
Mm-hmm.
Their brain probably produces it better, and that's like alcoholics. You can't just compartmentalize an alcoholic and go, they'll never come back, or one drink and they were addicted. We all have different immune systems. So
2 clients, brother and sister, they're both alcoholics, and the brother quit cold turkey,
Mhm.
and the sister just keeps,
Can't.
struggles her whole
Yeah.
life.
we all come different.
And
So
they're
it's like,
biological siblings.
don't mess with it. Don't mess with meth. That's for sure. And that has nothing to do with this class. All right. True or false, Utah was #1 in meth labs 10 years ago. Sounds good, huh? But it is false. We've never been #1 in meth labs. The only reason I put these two questions in here about meth labs is so you can never say it again in your real estate world, because you'll be telling the truth. Your clients have already gone to lab if meth is coming up in any way, whether it's pre-testing, lab always comes up. You will bring the tension down enormously, clear to the bottom when they go, oh, it's not a meth lab. Good, because I didn't see anything. But whether we acknowledge it or not, we all know meth users.
Mm-hmm.
We just sometimes don't know that we know them. That's like in real estate. 3 of you raised your hand, you've had meth houses. I promise you, have all had meth houses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You probably have it on the floorboards of your cars. If you're showing houses, you have meth. But I go, you walked into those cat and dog houses that are in the carpet, and you're like, I don't even want to walk in my house. You got lots of stuff on the floorboards of your car, right? But it's super duper prevalent. Don't think that it's not. It is worth it to have your buyers test, to me, so that they don't get stuck with the problem in 5 years when they call you up to sell. All right, let's see. I think we talked about that next one. If there's no meth lab, there's no contamination.
No.
Anything that creates that vapor is gonna leave the potential for contamination. And going back to the home inspector test where you were saying it was just in one area. If I'm smoking meth, what happens is when you're cooking meth or smoking meth, it has that vapor. There's teeny tiny baby crystal meth in that vapor. Wherever that vapor lands, it just sticks to the oily surface that we live in. And kind of an example of the oily surface that we live in. If my hands are filthy dirty and I go put my dirty hand against the wall and pull it back, will my dirty handprint still be there? It's the oily surface that we live in holding the dirt out of my hands. That's all it is. And third-hand meth, which is the real estate meth that we're dealing with, is just wherever that vapor lands with the baby teeny tiny crystal in it, stuck to the oily surface. You just can't see it. So if I'm smoking meth right here, and Jared with Pillar to Post does a test right here, and who else do we have? A1 back there. Would they get different numbers? They tested Yeah. So keep in mind, a meth test is just to go, is it here, is it not? Then we get in the weeds of, do we need to decontaminate the whole house? Do we need to do some pre-testing and find out it's only just the basement? Obviously, I don't do 9,000 square foot houses every day because we don't sell 9,000 square foot houses every single day, right? But the majority of our work is a full decontamination because if it's been recent, it's generally throughout the house. And what happens is if I'm smoking right here, and let's pretend I'm in a Rambler house, not in this office building, but if I'm smoking right here, the cold air return in the hallway or the front room,
That's where they test.
Yeah.
Is the furnace.
the return side of the system
Yeah.
is a great place to go. Now, I'm not a fan if your home inspector only tests one area, and there are some that do, drives me crazy, that they always go to the return side, which is great because the return is sucking 70% of the air in every house. So if I'm smoking in the bedroom, front room, kitchen, bathroom, the cold air return is tattletelling on me, right? Sucking it in, then it sends it to the furnace today, which will heat it up and then gently distribute it throughout the house. In the summertime with central air, it sends it and cools it up, down, whatever, cools the air and sprinkles it around the house. So at some point, it's not worth doing pre-testing. It's just going to be throughout the house, and some rooms are going to be high and some rooms are going to be lower. And then with that dirty handprint that's on the wall, if you walk by that, is it going to jump off the wall onto you? If I move in a new fridge right there, is it going to jump off the wall onto the fridge? If I put a new couch over there, am I going to contaminate my couch? It is actively moving around the air when it's actively being smoked. Once it lands, it's just stuck there. It doesn't move around. So there are times where it makes sense to do a little bit of pre-testing. If we have this house that came back, and it was around a 28, and a 28 generally is a full decon for me. It hadn't been remodeled. It was a 2-level townhouse, and the little grandma was selling it to get to 1-level house. No remodel or anything. It's 28, and I'm talking to her. She's shocked at first, and then she's like, "Oh, my son died of an overdose 25 years ago, and he did meth. That's probably where it's come from." So I'm thinking, in 25 years, how many times do walls get washed in a normal house in 25 years? Depends on the room, but maybe lots. If you have kids and pets, from here down all the time, right? It's always dirty. But kitchen often gets washed every time you paint. You wash your walls down so the paint will stick to the paint. But houses get attention over time. So I'm thinking, in 25 years, somebody's dealt with that. The carpet wasn't 25 years old, so figuring it's not in the carpet. We pre-tested her house. There wasn't a stitch of it anywhere in the whole house. And I'm testing ceiling, walls, and floors in every room. And it was all in the HVAC system. Because nobody has the tools to wash that. You can wash walls. People decontaminate their houses of meth all the time. They just don't even know it. They just think they're cleaning because they are. The decontamination process is nothing more than getting rid of the oily surface holding the meth. It's not tearing out sheetrock and tearing down the house and freaking everybody out. It is washing the oily surface. So we're washing every bit of ceiling, wall, floor because we don't know where it's at. Is it on this side, higher level, or that? It's so expensive to test. You generally just go to town on a house.
It sat in her HVAC system for 25 years, contaminating her house.
The health department says the half-life of meth is over 100 years. So for all intents and purposes, if you buy a house today that's 5 times over the legal limit and don't test, when you go to sell in 5 years, it'll be 5 times over the legal. Just, it's not gonna, because it's a crystal. You've heard the term crystal meth, right? It is manufactured into a crystal, plus that crystal physical substance is sticky. So it tends to stick. If you drop cocaine on the floor and little kids crawling around there, that's probably a bad thing. But when you vacuum, it vacuums it up, especially if it's near bedtime, right? But I go, drugs vacuum up. If you drop an OxyContin pill on the floor, the vacuum will vacuum it up. Meth doesn't do that. It just sticks. So, but every time you're washing a dirty handprint off the wall, the little kids that have dirty hands, whatever it is, washable floors get washed all the time. A home inspector that knows what they're doing would never, ever test a washable floor. Well, any floor, because floors get washed all the time. Carpets, they get shampooed, but we can't test carpets, so it gets a little tricky. So yeah, there's times when it's worth doing some pre-testing to go, if I don't have to torture a house, let's don't. But yeah, it'll stick. I bet you 25% of our work is just in the HVAC system only. And that for sure is I help somebody out. It's not the current people, or it's going to be around the house. If that makes sense. HVAC. And so not that I care who was smoking meth in that house, but I'm going to ask some questions. They generally tell me by the second phone call, oh, my piece of crap, whatever it is.
They know exactly. That's
Yeah.
interesting. She knew.
And if I can go, what was the timing of that? Well, if they're still living there right now, there's no need to do any pre-testing. It's throughout the house. No matter what that parent thinks, I promise you it's throughout the house if they're still living there. But also that client isn't going to meth test the next house they're buying either, right? They're going to take their tough love is easy to say, hard to do. So don't judge your clients if they go, I'm not going to do a meth test. They might have a very good reason for it. A, they don't believe in it. B, maybe they're moving their user with them. You don't have to be a judger of a no on a meth test. That's not what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to give your buyers a fighting chance to protect themselves. They don't know they need that until they go to sell and they're all ticked off then. Yeah, because it's really, whoever gets caught with it loses. So, all right. So we answered that one okay. There's no meth lab, there's no contamination. It's, yeah.
So sounds like if they are remodeling their house, they repaint, they refloor, there's still a possibility of it being in the HVAC system, but not anywhere else.
Yes. Yes.
So if they had an HVAC company clean out their furnaces, their vents, and all that stuff, would that get rid of it? If it was there?
It depends. If I vacuum my wall, is my dirty handprint going to go away? Now, there's nothing wrong with vacuuming out your vent systems. That's the first thing we do. We vacuum because we want the crayons, Tinker Toys, dust bunnies, everything out of there because the decontamination process is wet. So it's never bad to vacuum it out because any meth that's hooked to all the dust bunnies is gone. But duct cleaners are not washing that system out. And honestly, from my Atkin perspective, I don't even worry about this lady that lived in her meth house for 25 years. She probably wasn't subject to third-hand meth for a long time. She was subject to secondhand when her son was living there, but she hadn't been living in it for a long time because the second carpet gets replaced, it's not jumping off the wall onto the carpet. We just generally don't know when it's been introduced.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What are the symptoms of third-hand?
I'm gonna come back. I have 3 slides coming up here from the health department. And when you see this list, it's a kind of a laundry list of things. You'll go, we have a lot of that in Utah and we have a lot of meth use. And I believe there's correlation, but I want you to keep in mind when this list comes up, and I will give it to you. We all have different immune systems. All right. Raise your hand if you believe smoking causes cancer. Pretty much a no-brainer. Raise your hand if you believe everybody who smokes is going to get cancer. Because we have different immune systems. Raise your hand, somebody lung cancer, never smoked a day in their life. Yeah. So I go, our bodies are different immune systems.
Chain smokers who never did it.
Yeah, George Burns.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
Never.
so you can be in a meth house, not be subject to third-hand meth, that it'll still test positive, because if it's in the HVAC system,
So she didn't
From-
necessarily get infected from it.
I don't know.
25 years.
I'm not saying that, I don't know. But if it's only in the HVAC system and it's stuck to the oily surface, our ducts have oily surfaces, it's not moving around. The whole purpose of decontamination is not for y'all, not for me. We're adults with good immune systems, probably. Some of you may have lower immune systems and you watch what you put in your body. I am lucky enough that I go, I'm good with a pot of coffee this morning. Have my cranberry vodka at night, have a McDonald's hamburger. I don't really care what goes in this. It isn't very sacred to me. I just have good genes. And I'm grateful for that. I haven't had to fight anything too weird. But if you have an immune system that's pretty sensitive, you care about whether you're in a meth house. But you can live in a meth house and never be subject to the third-hand meth because it's stuck in the HVAC system. So from a health standpoint, trust that everybody that's living in a third-hand meth house is not subject to the ill effects of it. The health department doesn't have the luxury of just going, so when did that meth come in your house? Because everybody tells the truth, so we just let me know, so I know if the littles in this house are safe. The health department is black and white, right? And so if a house tests over the legal limit, our state standard is built upon what is safe for an infant on a daily basis. That's how we came up with our 1 microgram per 100 square centimeters. So if you've got a house that's 1 microgram, so it's legal, you're right at the threshold, and it's only in the HVAC system, and you move 100 kids into a newly remodeled, brand new carpet, brand new LVT. Even if it wasn't new LVT, how many times does LVT get washed? All the time, right? Washable floors get washed all the time. They wouldn't be subject to any third-hand meth in that house because it's all in the ducting. But until you do the testing, you've got to do this elimination process. What's that?
LVT.
LVT, isn't that what I said? LVT? Yeah, yeah.
Fancy linoleum,
What is it?
fancy linoleum.
Fancy linoleum in strips that are harder to put in, yep. So duct cleaning can get rid of the stuff that has meth on it. And from a realistic standpoint, if they actually used a HEPA vacuum and sucked all the gunk out, that house would probably not be at risk. But have you ever heard of a duct cleaner that comes in, doesn't use a vacuum and blows it all over the house? It happens on occasion. Then you have contaminated your house that was already clean,
Oh.
all right? The HVAC system deserves to be taken care of. But if it's only in there, the littles aren't at risk. Our standard is built for the lowest immune system person and the highest contaminated portion. Carpets, when's the last time you're down crawling around on the carpets? Anybody? Can't even think of when you were down on the carpets last. But the littles are down there doing their thing. So keep in mind, that's where our standard comes from. I go in behind people that have hired duct cleaners often. I hired them, they said they can do a decontamination. They can't. And so I'm not a fan of it. Not that I don't think it can get it, but if they vacuum everything out and think they're good to go, and your client hasn't done the test to see, the oily handprint will be there. And if the next inspector tests it in 5 years,
We haven't done keywords.
we're getting to them. We're getting to them. What time we got? You guys are asking good questions. We'll get through those 5 keywords. So the first one is certified decontamination specialist. So when you're looking for the red, you guys in this room, I guess I'm speaking to the camera on this. Certified decontamination specialist is your first keyword. And I'll elaborate a little bit on certified decontamination specialist. If you have a house that tests over the legal limit, that 1 microgram per 100 square centimeters, anything over that, so $1.01, you are now disclosing that house has meth in it forever and ever, amen. Your new buyers, the current sellers, whoever, on a rental, lease, or sales transaction, any real estate transaction, you are disclosing that house has meth in it now until you do full clearance testing, which consists of us testing ceiling, a wall, and a floor in every room. And that's got to be done by a certified decontamination specialist, run through the health department. Only then does it fall under stigmatized property where you don't have to disclose that house had meth in it. So certified decontamination specialists, there's about 30 in the whole state. I employ 6 of them. It's a super small number. There's not a home inspector that you brought up in this class that's a certified decontamination specialist. A home inspector does not override a home inspector. If your home inspector gets a 1.1 and you're like, are you beautiful house? And you're the listing agent and you're like, I'm sure it's not a 1.1. My client said everything's good here. I'm going to bring in my home inspector. And they get a 0.6. So you're under the legal limit. Or a no detect. Doesn't really matter. That doesn't clear the house. Any test that shows it over, anybody can make a house be over the legal limit. Only certified decontamination specialists clear them. That makes sense? All right. Fresh coat of good quality paint will eliminate meth contamination. True or false?
That would be a moneymaker.
So paint is an encapsulator. It will encapsulate my dirty handprint if I paint over it. It'll encapsulate pizza. Doesn't really matter what you paint over it, encapsulate. The chemical makeup of meth is it does not jump through sheetrock. This is research out of the Jewish Institute in Colorado. Does not jump from one bedroom to the next. How it's getting spread through the house is the HVAC system. But the research is that it does come out of paint. And all paint jobs are neat, right? I name remodels. The Walmart remodel, the Target remodel, and the Nordstrom remodel. You guys know exactly what I mean when I'm saying that, right?
Yes.
And there are some houses that are 100% remodeled. Nordstrom, you know, they've got new Holy Smooth texture and 2 coats of agreeable gray and primer underneath that. And if there was meth underneath there, I can't even imagine it ever coming out in our lifetime. And then there's some shady paint jobs. And there's meth on walls that gets decontaminated that just because somebody puts on a shady coat of paint in a house that tested positive for meth, it might not have even been on those walls, right? Keep in mind your pre-test is to simply go, is there meth in this house or is it not? And then we'll get in the weeds of how to get rid of it. Where it needs to be getting rid of versus let's just take a shotgun blast to the whole house. Generally, that's not the case. Well, I probably shouldn't say that. Generally, it is a full decontamination, but there's enough times it's worth doing some pre-testing to go. We're testing a house today, complete remodel. It's probably a high Target remodel, pretty nice remodel. And we went in there and pre-tested, and it was the kitchen and the HVAC system. So that's all we're doing. That'll save some money because I'll bubble the paint probably on new paint. It's painful on a house. So
You'll what? Bubble the,
bubble the, yeah, our product can bubble the paint.
oh,
So probably 80% of my houses have at least a bubble somewhere.
oh.
Probably 2% of my houses are a total freaking meltdown. They're horrible.
Really?
Oh yeah, and the sellers they hate my guts.
And this is
forever.
after a full remodel, Target remodel. You could
Can
bubble the paint.
We did a full remodel on a house. And this was an older Ogden house, the old pioneer houses. And they literally had put texture over wallpaper on the ceiling, which all of that doesn't make sense, right? But it was an old house. They had put wallpaper on it, and it was a newly remodeled house. We went through and pre-tested everything, and it was everywhere in the house. And so that could have been a contractor issue. And this house just melted down. And we've done a lot of jobs for this guy. So thank heavens he knew this wasn't the norm. But it was just dripping off the ceilings like a scary movie. And I'm like, is on your ceilings? And he's like, he textured over the wallpaper that was there. I don't know what's on the
wallpapers, they're
walls.
ceilings.
People do weird things.
And then texture over the wallpaper, over the paint, over the ceilings.
Now, you know, we're not all equal, right? All fixers and flippers aren't equal. There's some shady ones out there. There's some great ones out there. Just have your client do a meth test. That's why you do an inspection to go, was it a shady remodel or a great one? There's nothing wrong with either one. It's what does your client want and need, right? A shady one might be perfect for that first home buyer that's not savvy with doing any work on their own. They're just happy to have a coat of paint and be able to afford to get in a house today, right? So we don't have to judge what they did or didn't do. Some fixers and flippers have no idea about meth till they get caught.
I sold a 100-year-old house in Lehigh. They were thrilled. They camped in it for a year. The prior owners mummified their pets and put them in the walls. And
Creepy.
scared me to death, but
Yeah.
they were perfectly fine with it. Their dream house, I'm like,
Well, let me ask. So I do them, they're $175 for my first test. I generally don't do pre-testing. So let me ask this room, what is your home inspector's charging you? Do you have any idea?
About 150.
That's what I hear from the home inspectors. Mhm. Yeah, something along that line. And I can tell you, it's not an easy sell. It is not an easy sell, especially if they just dropped 1,000 due diligence on the last house. And they're going to the new, it's a tough sell to get that.
175, that's testing the furnace. That's not testing.
No, generally a pre-test, no, 3, yeah. Some will do 4, some will do 1, some do 2. But a pre-test, you can do several areas. And if it shows up and it's a 1.1, then your buyer's like, or your seller's like, well, which one of those areas was hot? We don't know. A pre-test is a composite to go, is it here? Is it not? So they'll generally include the HVAC system, but they'll check some other areas too. Like my go-to areas when I'm doing a pre-test, first of all, I am looking for the life of that house. I never pre-test over new paint, ever. Because I know it encapsulates, it's just a short-term encapsulation. But I will go, so the HVAC system generally is the whole life of that house. Most people, after they replace a furnace, do not replace all the supply lines, the cold air returns. Those generally stay with the house. A lot of times, so like on a Target remodel, they might have replaced all the flooring and all of the paint is good, but they haven't replaced cabinets. So I might test a cabinet. And I try to think like a meth user, which I'm not, and they don't think. So I don't know if all these areas are good. But I think if I was going to smoke meth in the bathroom, I'd sit on the toilet because my brother, growing up, he was always perched there. That's what I think. The health department says they like to watch themselves smoke in the mirror. So I go, either way, I think that side of the where the toilet paper is, if I'm looking at the mirror, maybe there'll be some meth there. If I'm sitting on the toilet, maybe there'll be, but a cabinet that's the life of the house. I'm looking for the life of the house. The ceiling fans in the bathroom. If I was smoking meth as a teenager, I tried this as not meth. I tried smoking in my mom's house by turning on the bathroom fan as a teenager and thought I was going to get away with it. Now meth, you could probably get away with it because there's no odor with meth, but bathroom fans are generally, even in remodeled houses, that's an area that's pulling air to it, like the cold air return.
I just thought they wouldn't smell the smoke.
You wouldn't on meth. You'd never know if
No,
somebody
I mean,
smoked
when
meth.
you
in your
smell
house.
yeah,
That's how stupid I was as a teenager. I'm just,
If it wasn't remodeled, would you just do the wall
I,
walls?
my general go-to places are the return side of the furnace, the dirtiest place I can find. Bathroom fan areas, ceiling. I tend to do the cupboards over the stovetop. If you look underneath those cupboards right there, there's all the spaghetti sauce and French fries grease from ever, as long as I, so I generally will test underneath there. Because in the beginning, when I started testing there, I'm like, well, if they're cooking it on the stove, I don't even worry about that now. But if I'm not finding it in those dirty, nasty areas, it's not gonna be in the good areas either. I'm always looking hard to find it, because if I don't find it, I know nobody else is gonna find it. So a pre-test is to go, look in the nasty areas, protect your client, and do 3 or 4 areas. Some home inspectors only do the cold air return. And I'm like, that's cool, that's great, but what if the house doesn't have central air? And Thug Kid only smoked meth during the summertime with my window open so my mom wouldn't catch me. Then it'll be in that room and it won't be caught by the pre-test. So I'm a fan of test several areas, but I'm always looking for the nastiest part of the house, not the nicest.
So if you found pretest 1.01, how do you then know which rooms to narrow it down to? Because that might not be everywhere. If in the worst spot, it was 1.01, right?
Right. So the reason why I know it's generally not in other areas, a lot of times I don't recommend pre-testing, right? And it could be because like this call yesterday that I got was 0.11. If I had decontaminated a house and not pre-tested, post-clearance tested, and I got 0.11s in all my rooms, I'd be thrilled. I literally leave meth behind in houses when we're done. And I have to be 1.0 or lower with the health department. And we would all be thrilled if we could be at 0.11. So my conversation is if I decontaminated that house and I got it to 0.11, I'd put my own grandkids in there. Go live your best life there. I have nothing to sell you, nothing. There are some clients that are like, I don't want some, I want none, right? If that house was 1.01 or 0.99, those are different legally. One is under the legal limit, doesn't involve the health department. 1.01 does involve the health department. To me, they're exactly the same. So if it's over the legal limit on the pre-test, I am required by law to test every single room individually, ceiling, wall, floor. What I have found is I waste a lot of clients' money because on the 1.1 houses, the 2.3 houses, especially if it's been remodeled, I'm still required to test all those rooms and it's not there. 90% of the remodeled houses that we do that test positive from a home inspector pre-test, 90% of those, it's all in the HVAC system. So we just handle that. Sometimes we find it's a room or two, sometimes we find it is all over, but we narrow it down room by room by room. And sometimes we find a room that's over. I don't generally recommend pre-testing every single room when it's under the legal limit because I look like a dirt bag and I'm trying to get a read on the buyer going, how much are you going to freak out? Let's just do the HVAC system. 0.99, 1.1, it's going to be HVAC system. Almost always. And almost always, that's all it will be. It won't be extra rooms.
So I noticed that you said that you didn't smell it, but I had a home inspector on a home inspection and he fired up the furnace and he's like, oh no, we came for our walkthrough. He's like, I fired up the furnace. I smelled something I don't like to smell and we need to test the house for meth.
I wasn't there.
Yeah, so I pulled the report on it and it was at 106. So, I mean, well over what it was. We had to do a full decontamination on the house, but did you tell everybody that you don't smell it or
Yeah.
like, because I also heard that you smell like kind of a cat urine-ish smell.
Mhm.
And that's what I look for or I smell for, because I have a really good sense
I don't
of
think that's
smell.
a bad thing. So
But I like to, look for signs and look for other things that
And I love that you're looking for signs, and so I don't want to make anybody wrong. If you are cooking meth, and let's not pretend there's not a little bit being cooked, right? I go to that house that we finished, that was 200, there was 2,500 times over in that bathroom. Had to have been some small batch cooking. So if you are cooking meth, you're gonna have that cat pee smell.
Yeah.
You will.
Yeah.
Since we're not cooking meth, for the most part in Utah, we're smoking it. When you're smoking meth, I understand there's about a 7-second sweet odor and it is gone. You'll never know. Now, can you have odors in a meth house? Because remember when they're over here on the high 10x10, they got all that dopamine and they're taking apart and fidgeting with everything. All the TVs are taken apart and cell phones and electronics because they're up for 3 days and they can't go to sleep. Because that's, meth is doing that. It's keeping them up. Then our bodies literally require sleep. So they come off of that high. Now they're getting the despair. They'll sleep for 3 days. You've heard that about drug users,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
When they're sleeping for 3 days, they don't go out. The cat doesn't go out. The dog doesn't go out. You can have odors in a meth house, but it's not related to the physical smoking of it. So when you're, I'm not saying somebody couldn't sniff something out in a furnace if they're, who knows?
I just like,
Yeah.
oh, well, he was definitely right. I'm gonna.
Yeah,
let my
and
inspector
sure,
put in the-
sure. Yeah, and I'm glad he said it. It's awesome.
Yeah.
What I
Like you're
know,
saying, she did not, she had 2 older dogs,
Mhm,
but like,
yeah.
I don't know where the correlation is.
I don't
Like,
know
why did
either.
you smell it coming out of the furnace?
You've never
Because
seen,
I know,
that
it's
means that
interesting.
the dog was in the furnace.
I am in some of the nastiest smelling houses and I test them and I'm like, this thing is gonna be so hot. You've all been to these houses where you're like, I wanna quit my own company. I hate those cat houses. I hate them with a passion.
Yeah.
And so there are, and sometimes I test houses. I remember one specifically I tested, it had all the signs of meth. There's needles, there's tin foil, there is no running water in the house. There's a crap bucket in the back. I mean, it's just a nightmare. And I'm expecting it to be off the charts. And it comes back, no detect. And I'm like, did I do something wrong? There's no method to the madness. That's what I do know. I'm okay with you looking at houses and going, oh, well, we got some signs? Cool. But the majority of houses that I do, there's no signs.
Oh, really?
The majority of the houses I do, there are no signs. If you have an odor to go, let's do a test, cool. If you have weirdness to do a test, cool. Test every house every time because the majority of houses that I decontaminate are beautiful. They're ones I would never suspect. And I'm a judger of every house I test. I'm from Utah, I judge. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. Go back to that first slide, if you will, just a sec. I want to talk about one thing because this is super duper important. Grandma and grandpa have lived in this house for 50 years, so there's no need to test. Salt.
That's where.
Yeah, I think I told you, there's no time I don't have at least a couple grandma, grandpa houses going on.
Yeah.
And I think it's because there's a lot of history, right? There's a lot of people that have moved through that house and the house has been there a minute. That's what it is. I'll tell you my 3 signs, top signs, which are top percentages of what to look for in a meth house. If your client needs a sign, here's my top 3 percentages. If it's a grandma, grandpa house, test it. They're probably my number 1 house. And they get remodeled often so they can be somebody else's new first house and it's immaculate. Grandma, grandpa houses are hotbeds. Any history of rental or fix or flipper. And I'm a landlord, I've fixed and flipped houses. It doesn't make everybody dirtbags. Again, a little more history of people moving through the house. So, and you don't always know if it's been a rental in the buy market, right? Sometimes you do, but grandma, grandpa houses, any history of fix or flipper and weird locks. And I know weird locks are vague. And if it's a Nordstrom remodel, there will be nothing weird because there's nothing weird in a Nordstrom remodel, right? They're perfect. But you know, on the door where the doorknob goes into the striker plate over here. Well, weird locks are exterior locks on interior doors. When you go for that showing and you can't get in the bedroom door because it's got a deadbolt or a keyed lock, That's weird.
Oh.
But they might even all have nice locks, but the trim around that side is busted out from somebody kicking in the door. And it doesn't make it all meth. They're just high percentage things, right? If it works to go, smells like, to get them to do a test, I'm totally cool with whatever gets them to do a test. That's a win for me. Because the majority of those tests are not going to be positive. They'll find it if it's there. And most of the time it's not going to be there, but at least they won't have bought a problem that's going to be their pocketbook when they go to sell. Because meth testing isn't going anywhere. I mean, people are now able to say meth out loud in Utah, and we all kind of go, oh, you too? Oh, bummer, you know? We can do that, but it will stop the people from, and it doesn't mean they can't buy the house. It could be the perfect house. I can keep almost any deal together. Sometimes people are like, I can't do it. I can't promise that I can keep every deal together, but almost always it's if you're the buyer agent, listing agent, and seller. You know, you've had your buyer do an inspection, and then let's say you're the inspector, you call up and go, there's meth in the house. And you call up the buyer and go, there's meth in the house. And you're freaking out and going, let's go shopping. And you call up the listing agent and go, there's meth in the house. And then you have the unpleasant job of telling your seller.
What? There's no way.
Yeah.
No, I would know.
Yep, that's my world. And so all of that's happening, and all these thoughts and feelings are going around. And generally what happens is you take the house and make it inactive on MLS. You go, son of a bee, I got to do it for this buyer or the next one. And a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. Let's keep this one in the deal. If it's a full decon, great, now you get to pick out your own carpet, right? She don't like that color anyway. And sometimes it's, oh, son of a gun, I get to buy carpet twice. That carpet was only, you know how it is with sellers. It's 5 years old, and I just put that in. Whatever. It's painful for you. It's super duper painful. But most of the time, you're going, I'm screwed anyway. You're going to have to fix it.
Because now if the buyer got the meth test, now the seller has to close it up, even if the next buyer.
Yep. Can't put your commissions on MLS, but you will for sure have to put meth on. You have to.
And if he doesn't want to disclose it, she has to, because she now knows as a.
Well, what else is
There's five.
is that you- Likely your buyers, and this is for the majority of buyers that I've had this done to do, is they don't want that meth user or that family in the house anymore.
Yep.
And it's very hard for them to say, I'm not getting money yet, where am I going as a seller? And have to, so
For
there is
sure.
a lot of quirky parts. You know, putting a little bit of non-refundable, you know, like earnest money down so that you
Yeah.
can get the decontamination.
Yeah.
Get it rolling, get it started, so they know you still have skin in the game, you're not just gonna walk away.
Yeah.
But still moving your deal.
Timing
forward.
is everything in the deal.
Yeah.
Because some are already out. The vacant houses are simple, right?
Yeah.
Or you said they
Two-
might take the user with them. He might choose to.
Right, but we don't know that. And that's not our job to know that.
Pretend like they didn't do it.
And that might be their truth.
Yeah.
Every seller disclosure is no too, right? It doesn't mean they're liars. It means they don't know. That's just the truth. And so vacant houses are simple. 2 years ago on the market, maybe 3. Remember when, if your house had meth today, it was okay because then you could kick that buyer out and it's worth 5,000 more tomorrow anyway on fire. And you were selling houses going, you have 90 days that you can live here.
Yes.
Those were trickier
And
ones.
that's what they wanted.
Yeah. So then you are doing escrow. Whatever your deal is, we can work the timing, the nuances. I mean, we had one that was a 1031 exchange. So there's no moving deadlines on this.
Right.
That line is in the sand. And we actually I paid my team overtime to work the weekend. We rushed. This was a pretty big house too. It had like 28 tests, 26 different rooms. So we had 28 tests that we were overnighting. so we could make that deadline happen, because the lender would absolutely not lend on the portion they were financing without it being completed. So I got the help. We're all, whatever it is, but timing makes it hard. The cost makes it hard. I don't want to pretend meth is a broken microwave, but at the end of the day, it's like a broken microwave. You're going to fix it because you're stuck with it. Yeah.
What does, so I guess two questions. What does the timing look like? How long does it take you to test normally? And then how long does it normally take for decontamination?
So when I'm doing a pre-test, it's 175. But I don't normally do pre-tests. I prefer your home inspector does. I really do. Because if it's over the legal limit, I am required by law to turn it into the health department. Now in Utah County, they're not going to shut a house down. In Salt Lake County, your clients will be out tomorrow if I turn in a test today that's over the legal limit. That's painful. That's a timing thing. So home inspector tests, because we don't do drugs in Utah County, so we don't need to deal with it.
Oh, did I wait for that? Did you say?
Yeah, she did.
I'm so sorry. But I think yeah, I know, right? Don't come late for the medical.
She lives in Provo and she said there are no
No,
drugs. in
Penn
Provo.
Health is in Springville
Yeah.
too, but I can
Yeah.
help with it.
Yeah, so
They
I'm,
can come out the next 24 hours later if you legally have to turn it in.
in
Just
Salt
Salt
Lake
Lake
County,
County.
Weber, Morgan, they'll kick your clients out. They'll shut a house down. So I prefer that your home inspectors do it for two reasons. We have a little bit more timing in these health departments that are stricter, and they're going to be generally less expensive than I am. They're only going to interrupt the seller one time. Just have your home inspector do it.
It's already there, so just have them do it.
Yeah, I typically get involved in the testing more when we go, oh my gosh, it's over. But the seller's like, you're wrong. It didn't happen on me. And maybe it didn't. But you go, I bought this 2 years ago and I didn't do a test. Now I'm stuck with this stupid bill. And then I have to go in and it's 175 for the first test plus 85 for each additional room. Those are generally 4-day turnaround time. If we need them rushed, it's an additional $45 per test at the lab. If we do same day testing, I have to have them to the lab by 9 o'clock this morning. So there's no same day today at this point, right? But everything can be done with money. If you need something done fast, you're paying overtime, you're paying higher. So did that answer that question on
I
testing?
think
Okay.
you talk over like how long it takes for you to do the decontamination.
It's about 5 days for us to do the work, but then we're waiting another 4 days on test results. So it's about a 2-week process. Now, for all of you guys online that are thinking, oh my gosh, she's only got 25 minutes left, we have covered a lot of stuff, so we'll tear through some slides. But your first word, certified decontamination specialist. Let's go down to our next one, because I think we've handled a lot of this. We've talked about repainted and carpeted top to bottom. Test that house too, because it'll be HVAC if it's there generally. It only takes 3 times smoking meth to get it over our legal limit of 1 microgram per 100 square centimeters. That can be the babysitter.
Wow.
We don't have to figure out where the meth has come from. That's not our job. I don't care. I care from a standpoint of if I'm working with you and we're trying to figure out whether to spend your money pre-testing, then I kind of care about when it was introduced, not who. It literally doesn't take much, and generally it's not the babysitter. Generally, you know where that meth has come from. So, yeah, the second one is 1 microgram, but we've already talked about, y'all know what 1 microgram is now, right?
Yes.
State standard for required decontamination. I think we've talked about this one a little bit. Have to completely tear out sheetrock and remove the entire furnace. Old school information. You don't have to do that anymore. We have chemicals that'll take care of it. This is a number that is based upon our most current census with the number of households we have in Utah, and 1 in 10. And I will tell you, in Utah, I truly believe we're higher than 1 in 10. But that gives us over 113,000 households in Utah that are going to have meth in it. It's, to me, there's every reason to test every house every time. And I know this is more buyer agent class than listing agent class, because you would never go to your sellers and go, listen, before we put this on the market, I think we should do a meth test. And they'd go, What do you think about me, right?
Yeah.
They don't know, and
He's gonna freak if she suggests that.
well, and he won't even think of Uncle Ed, who came 3 years ago to visit all the national parks, and you knew he was a wild bugger. But he stayed for 30 days and
Or I've had the house for 5 years, but the house is 20 years old. What happened those first 15?
you have, these sellers have no idea. For the most part, they are shocked that it's there. And they have to do some serious mental gymnastics back in time to figure out where it's come from. And it doesn't even make it necessarily true. You just generally have a better idea of, well, if meth is in my house, it's probably not that kid. It's probably that kid, because
Uncle Ed that stayed 30
Yeah.
days, he'll know.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
they figured it out. So that's your second word, have to clear out. All right. We talked about all that, so you can go to the next slide there.
So you cannot detect meth by smell.
If it's actively being smoked right there in front of you, you'll smell it, but otherwise it's gone. And it doesn't mean you don't have smells in a meth house. Because you can. So this is from the Department of Health, just showing me in 2004, we had 107 meth labs. Literally our last one was 10 years ago. We just are not cooking meth. So you really are telling the truth to your clients when they go, oh my gosh, somebody was cooking meth in this house. Just calm the tension down and call it what it is. It's contamination that somebody smoked in there. Not that that makes it good, but it's fixable. It's all doable. And this is the number that always freaks me out. Of those in treatment for meth in Utah, 75% are women and moms. 75%. Test every house, every time. All right, go ahead to the next slide.
So that's people in treatment. That's not 75% of moms.
No.
No, it's
No.
75% of treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I go, sometimes I wonder, where do they get these stats? Because nobody ever calls me up on the phone
Right.
and says, let's do a survey about drugs.
Right.
So I don't know where, I'm sure there's some of it is from the
People-
hospital, some of it's from treatment centers.
That could also be saying the people most likely to actually seek treatment are women and moms.
It could be that, and I've thought that. Think of this as a mom or a dad, for you, a few dads in the room. If you had a child that was addicted to meth, and we all want them to go through treatment, right? We want them off. Would you be more inclined to put your daughters in versus your sons? You go, that's my kid. I want him off drugs. Would you be more inclined to, I'll just cut to the chase on this one, and I believe it. So, I live in Provo, and now I'm old. My hips were bugging me, so I went to the hip doctor. Right across from Utah Valley Hospital. I called up my friend who's a nurse. I'm like, who's the best hip doctor? So I go into this hip doctor. I'm like, my hips hurt, and he looks at my shirt and he's like, what's MethMob? And I'm like, I own a company that decontaminates meth houses. Verbatim, this is what he says. Oh, we prescribe that Mormon mommy meth medicine all the time. It's exactly what he said. And I'm like, what? Mormon, yeah. ADHD medicine is amphetamine that gets you fired up when your doctor finally cuts you off. Guess what? You need all that energy. We've had stories about school teachers and principals stealing ADHD medicine because it fires us up as adults and it calms kids down.
Oh.
That is a precursor drug to meth. Legal drug that has a good purpose. But I'm just like, apparently everybody knows. I don't either.
The Mormon mommy meth medicine.
We prescribe it all the time.
They could just drink hard.
Right? If we could just teach that it's okay, you are a worthwhile, valuable human being. Yeah, and I go, I think that's why we do a lot of that here. That's my judgment on it, but I go, we do a lot of perfection and judgment, and it's hard to be perfect all the time.
No, but really, the expectations are high.
Yeah.
Can't drink coffee. Like, seriously, that is the problem.
My husband says get a mild vice and cling to it for life, because otherwise you're gonna go for the.
I like that.
Had a
Yeah, I go, I really do think that's in part why we have some of those kind of shadow things that we're not that great at. Yeah, cold caffeine, right? And I'm a sugar-free Red Bull drinker. You guys all know my vices, right? I'm not the world's greatest person. But it took me a minute before I could finally go, and I'm a worthwhile human being.
Right.
Even if I drink a pot of coffee before I get here. Judge me or don't,
And then
whatever.
cranberry vodka when you get home.
Yeah.
Just don't do it the opposite. Just don't drink cranberry.
My
vodka.
office yesterday.
Coffee versus the meth, so.
Nicole in my office, you guys know Nicole in my office, any of you? Yesterday, she comes in and she's like, we need a margarita machine in this office.
Yeah.
And we office out of the Keller Williams building in Orem. I'm like, that'd go over like a.
We had heroin addict for clients and they were picture perfect. They said they do everything they can. Their children were adorable. Their house was clean because they are trying to hide it from neighbors and family. And you
Yeah.
would have never
There's
guessed.
a lot
in
of crazy out there. You don't know. That's my point.
They
You would
were
never
picture
guess.
perfect.
Go ahead to the next slide. This is just more information, just showing we used to have a lot of meth labs. We don't now. These are some national stats, not Utah specific, but again, just showing a completely different demographic for drugs. Meth is a white person drug.
Mm.
And I'm not saying y'all are off the hook back there, or guys are off the hook, but it is a working person's drug. And who works harder than a white mom in Utah? And that is a little bit tongue in cheek, but you know what I'm talking
No,
about.
yes, seriously.
Typically, we're a two-income
Teenage
household.
children too.
Typically, when the kids are sick, who calls in sick to work, mom or dad? Typically. Mom, typically, but she still has her job to handle. And then you got to handle piano lessons, soccer practice, cook dinner, handle the homework, clean the house. 30 days later, you've lost 5 pounds. It's the miracle drug.
Mm.
And I go, that's why it's prevalent. Whatever people's reasoning are for the addiction is a very different reason than the first time they started it.
So they're on a 3-day high and then a 3-day crash generally?
Probably. I don't know in general. That's like going,
No,
what is
because
an
I'm thinking
alcoholic?
of some
look like?
relatives like that's what their
Mhm.
pattern is.
So I thought you were thinking,
Yeah.
that's not too bad of a deal.
If I go to a 3-day work week, I'm golden. Golden.
So you get a 3-day high and then only a 3-day? Oh, no. So what's the name of that doctor?
Oh,
that
I
you
know,
went to?
I know. Don't go there.
Let's all go for that. What's the name of the doctor? Yeah, let's bring.
He's a good hip doctor.
Can you fake him?
And I go, I think that they just know a doctor is trying to do the right thing too, right? The fine line between when is it the right prescription versus when do people cross over? You don't know that. So
No, it's a pattern.
Yeah.
There's some friends of ours and they will respond for 3 days and then they ghost.
Well, there
for
you
3
go.
And I'm
when
like,
you
that's
have a buyer buying their house, test. And it might be positive, it might not. Who knows? Just do the test. Okay, so those are national stats, but again, completely different demographic. Completely different demographic than other drugs. Go ahead to the next slide. There's your third world word for online gratitude. That's gratitude.
for meth.
No, that's my daughter who did meth when she was a teenager.
She did.
And she does it now, and I'm grateful.
And she's a Mormon mom and she's.
Well, she's kind of Jack Mormon like me.
Oh.
But, and that's an old picture too. I can't show this in Moab because her
It was
husband's
perfect.
from Moab and it's too little of a town, but, so don't judge a book by its cover. How's that? You never know. And I didn't even know she did meth when she was a
You?
teenager, living with her dad. I hated her as a teenager. That's when I started calling up my mom going, I'm super sorry. And
That you were.
and when I started MethMob and started doing meth, that's when she told me she did meth with her dad in California. I had no idea. So I'm grateful.
And you
So
weren't in the
carry on to the
business?
next slide. No, I've owned MethMob for about 8.5 years, and literally 9 years ago, I didn't know a meth user. Now I'm like, oh my hand.
Yes, I can see it.
I'm gonna give you the quickest history of meth, so I get you out of here on time. Invented late 1800s. Once it was made water soluble, that's when the government started feeding it to their troops. You didn't need food. You have tons of energy. You can stay up all night. It's been a weight loss medication that was prescribed legally, schizophrenia medicine prescribed legally. There are legal purposes for it, and there's abuse for it too. So that was when it became popular, is the World War I, World War II. Carry on to the next slide. That's what you don't have to do. Take it down to studs. Is that not Mary Maids and Ghostbuster Soup?
Yes.
That is, all we're doing is getting off the oily surface, the fingerprints, we just can't see them. So you've got to do every inch of ceiling, wall, floor, cupboard, drawer, duct, Harry Potter closets. But if your client is one of those that goes, I want to do it myself, and we do a lot of do-it-yourselfers in Utah, and that's okay. About twice a month, I'm testing. They can't do their own testing. Homeowners of record can legally do their own decontamination, but on grandma's house, that doesn't work. You don't get to bring everybody over for a family. It's got to be owner of record or certified decontamination specialist companies. So there aren't too many. There's probably about 6 in the state that do the work.
Because there's no drugs.
That too. Yep. All right, go ahead down to our next one. That's why we're talking about meth in real estate. It really isn't a drug class, it's a contamination in houses. Because in that baby teeny tiny crystal meth that's left over, all these things are used to convert one molecule in Sudafed. Ephedrine is the main precursor chemical. There's one molecule difference between that and meth. And you put in things like Drano, starter fluid, heat, ether, Coleman camping fluid. All these things are to convert that one molecule, and all these things are left over in the baby teeny tiny crystal meth that's wherever it lands. That's why we're talking about third-hand meth in houses versus heroin, cocaine. It's not a drug issue. It's this crap is left over here when the little kids are crawling around, and it will absorb through their skin. And a real estate transaction is a great time to go, that's cool that you lived in this house, because the horse is already out of the barn when they find out. And it doesn't really matter. But the new family doesn't have to be moving into that. Generally, they don't know. And in the real estate transaction, it's a great time to go, whatever it is you're fixing. A home inspection doesn't mean the house is a piece of crap. It's a 6-day game plan, a 6-week, a 6-month, a 6-year game plan. Because no house is perfect. It can still be the right house, but sometimes updates are done for that new family coming in. It's like after your sellers paint their house and put new carpet, it's like, maybe I don't want to sell now. I like my house again, all right? So it's a good transition time to fix it and get rid of it. Go ahead and, okay, go down just a little bit because that's our, yep. Nope.
No.
I should say up, a little bit more. There you go. There's our, or is that our 4th word, 3rd word? 4th, where are we at? Certified testing. That's a word, wherever we're at. Now go make it a little bit more up. So certified testing. That is what you have to have in order to clear a property. Once you have a positive meth test, it's got to be done through a certified decontamination specialist to have it qualify for stigmatized property. Right down there on the bottom, I don't know if you can see that 18, 4.5 and 0.10. Remember when I was talking about $1?
Yeah.
$18, $4.50, 10 cents. Now this piece of paper makes some semblance of sense because you get that to a buyer and they're like, thanks for nothing. That's super duper confusing. So this is what this test means. The 18 is the actual amount of meth found. So your first number on this test is actual amount of meth. I found 18 micrograms. Flip side of that, 10 cents, that's the lowest of the lab test to. So if there's 9 cents worth of meth or 0.09, it's a no detect. This is on almost all the tests. If they're super duper high, that might come back at 1.0. They'll dilute it, but for the most part, that's what it is. How many times does $4.50 go into $18? 4 times. $4.50 times 2 is $9. 9 times 2 is $18.
And is that because the area was 400?
Yeah.
Or
You look 3 lines above there, see where it says 400 cm squared? I reported to the lab, hey lab, I tested 4 legal areas. Whatever comes back, comes back. I tested 4 legal areas. They found 18, so that's for real. This is the per 100 square centimeters. This is your legal number, $4.50. That has to be 1.0, $1 or less.
Okay, now if that area said 100, would that not be really attached to and want to consider as a buyer seller? Because sometimes they only test, it said 100. I don't,
Yeah, this is a pretest. If I had only tested one area
Yeah,
and they
is that
found
really-
18, this would be 18 and 18.
because they didn't divide it by 4
Right.
areas.
Because I'm saying I only tested one area.
Oh, okay.
If I had tested 3 areas,
It'd be
let's say
divided by
this, I
3.
cleared this room, ceiling, wall, and the floor, what would my middle number be if they found 18? 6. So this is an average, but it's the legal number because it's the per 100 square centimeter.
But shouldn't you be asking your inspector to do 4 areas or at least 3?
At least
At
3.
least 3.
And so if it says 1, and so he only did 1, can you say, let's do another test with?
Yeah, and I'm happy if your home inspector doesn't do 3 areas, hook me up with them. I'll train them for free. I would 10 times rather home inspectors do a great job than, I mean, we just finished this house.
get her-
A home inspector did an instant test, reported to the buyer, hey, there's meth in this house. An instant test don't give levels. Says there's meth in this house. So then they call us and it's a remodeled house. We tested every room individually, ceiling, wall, floor. In every room in the HVAC, there's not a stitch of meth in this house. And I look hard. And it kind of sucks because if that home inspector scratched their leg right at the time or grabbed their phone out of their pocket, because you're calling and you guys have been doing tag all day and they were in your house before that was chock full of meth, grabbing the phone in your house, doing this, and they cross-contaminated. Or they aren't wearing gloves or whatever. I would 10 times rather train your home inspector. If you love your home inspector and they're not testing 3 areas, just hook me up. I'm happy to train them for free.
Or we can just tell them, make sure you do 3.
Well, sometimes they don't know what 3 to do.
Well, we can tell them now.
Yeah.
Ceiling, walls, and-
Yeah, well, I just did clearance testing on a house in Bluffdale. The home inspector tested 4 areas and it was a high number. And it was a super nice house and the agent's like, I don't believe it. My sellers don't believe it. And I'm thinking I'm wasting their money to do additional testing. And my tester went up there, no detect. And this is down from like over 100 number. And I'm like, did we do something wrong? So then the buyer and the seller are freaking out going, who's right? Who's right? It gets really dicey. So I called up the home inspector and I'm like, where'd you test? And he's like, I tested the front doorknob, the garage doorknob. This house had 2 furnace systems and both returns. And in my mind, I'm like, never tested doorknob. That doesn't tell the house. Because if you were smoking meth showing that house and it's going to be all over your hand, it's going to be it's going to look like we're high. Or if I just wash the doorknob and it's all over the house, a doorknob's not a great place. But he was doing the very best he knew how to do. So then and I don't even test garages unless a buyer is crazy, but I'm like, there's worse things on your garage floor than third-hand meth. Oil, antifreeze, whatever else you got on there. I don't even test garages, but I had to go through this entire house to find a teeny tiny trace in the garage. And I go, I feel bad for a seller. So it matters where you test. It matters how you test. You and I would think that because we're of that age where we hid stuff. Your kids can be looking at porn at the dinner table with you sitting there next to them. We'd never know half the crap that goes on right in front of our face. Our age hid stuff. If we found a pack of cigarettes or a penthouse, we're hiding out back.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. It
Just blatantly in front of
it just doesn't happen with meth. I've found that it's not a hired drug. I have found that through our experience. They're not hiding out. They're living there. We good on that test?
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm doing close to get you out of here on
Yes.
time. I might be a couple minutes late. Let's go to the next one. These are the 3 slides from the health department. And again, infants and children are the most vulnerable part of our population. That's what our standard is built for. Go to the next slide. This is the list of things that the health department believes third-hand meth can contribute to. And when you look at that list, we have a lot of that stuff going on in Utah. And we have a lot of meth use in Utah. And I believe there's correlation. But I also believe everybody who smokes doesn't get cancer, right? Everybody who's living in a meth house is not subject to third-hand meth. Because if it's in the HVAC system, I have tested HVAC systems over 100 times over the legal limit, and it's nowhere in the house. That tells me it sticks to wherever it lands. So it's worth decontaminating for. This is why I own the company that I do, right? It's totally worth decontaminating, and that doesn't happen to everybody. We just don't know. All right, let's carry on to the next one. I think we've got one more keyword coming up, right? So this is a busy slide from the health department, but this is how it's happening. Inhalation, ingestion, and absorption. That's third-hand meth. It's the littles crawling around, and then they touch the wall as they're learning how to walk, and you put a banana in their hand and they'll ingest a little, or it'll absorb through their hands, whatever. So that's how it's happening. Okay, carry on with. This is my don't judge a book by its cover slide. This was the highest house we've ever decontaminated. It was 10,000 times over the legal limit. And that's the listing papers right on the little counter. 10,000 times over. And in fact, I didn't even trust myself when I did the test. I called up another certified decontamination specialist. I'm like, I did something wrong. Get in here. He tests it 10,000 times over. This is a house that looks like Breaking Bad. This is the basement. That's the washing machine. That's the side of the furnace. You guys got a fridge. You need a Diet Coke to do the laundry. And I'm expecting this one to be off the charts. 4 times over the legal limit. Most of my houses in the real estate transaction are higher than this. Just test every house every time. If you can get your client to test, why doesn't matter. The biggest why for them is, so when you call me in 5 years to sell this thing, let's don't find it then.
Then the new homeowners would inherit a problem.
Mhm.
So where was it highest? Where did you test where it was highest?
The HVAC system. All right, let's go on to our next one. At the end of the day, you can't spot a potentially contaminated houses. They're just reasons to have a conversation. And income stressed houses, they can be meth houses if that's the right conversation. Trust all of these, how can I spot a meth house, is for no other reason than if they won't buy into the, when you call me in 5 years, let's don't find it then. If they need a reason, cool, use it, it's pre-foreclosure. Every drug user will have money problems, but we don't know where they're at in the cycle. We don't even know where the house is at in the drug user cycle. So income stress might be a great conversation. Go on to the next one. Neglected houses might be a great conversation. Carry on to the next one. And punched in holes in the wall, signs of anger might be a great conversation to get them to do the test, but it doesn't mean that. All right, there's our last word, health department. If you want it to qualify for stigmatized property where you do not have to disclose, full clearance testing by a certified decontamination specialist, every single room individually, certified decontamination specialist, and you've got to run it through the health department. Otherwise, you're disclosing. So it's like, why wouldn't he just pay the money and keep the buyer in? You don't want to have to disclose this.
Yeah.
That goes on, and we can't get an appraiser in there. We can't get a carpet measure in there. That's why it's just, we just make it inactive typically. And Utah County doesn't put those on. This is one from Salt Lake. We can post it on the inside with their permission because they know we play by the rules, but that gets kind of ugly when that gets up there. I'm always going, is the appraiser in there? If train's on the track and your appraiser's in, they're in meth houses all the time. I'm not losing my mind over it, but it keeps train on the track. All right, go ahead and go to the next one. Stigmatized property, you know what you have to do for that, right? go to the next slide. This is your law that says as agents, you are not required to disclose to the health department. So as an agent, when you get you're the buying agent, you have the test, you're the listing agent. You don't have any moral, legal obligation to turn it into the health department. And that matters in Salt Lake County, because if you did, they would kick your client out. And if they're moving out February 1st, I'm okay with that. So as an agent, unless you are the owner of record as well, agents are not required to turn into the health department. You are required to disclose on a real estate transaction, MLS, that type of thing. But health department, you're not. Go ahead to the next slide.
Probably whoever is like tested and stuff, they're required.
No, in fact, if you guys will give me just a couple minutes, I'll tell you who's not legally required and who is. Because we're probably out of time. And don't worry, you've got the ground of this. Here's who's legally required to turn in test results to the health department. Certified decontamination specialists, and I have 5 days. There's 30 of us in the whole state. There's not that many. I employ 6, super low number. Your home inspectors, with the exception of Jonathan Brockbank with Aerolite, he is the only certified decontamination specialist. And he only does testing. He doesn't do decon work. Home inspectors will never turn it into the health department because they want your business. They're okay with timing too. The lab will never turn it in. Certified decontamination specialists and homeowners of record. He's not going to turn in his own house.
No.
That's like me sending money to the state today for my speeding ticket back to Provo. Yeah. Yeah, I go, so homeowners of record are required to disclose, and we typically do that when we turn in the work plan. So I'll keep you honest, but timing, I'm okay. If you're moving out January 15th, December 1st, we'll work timing. You will disclose when we're ready to disclose. But you don't get to avoid it, not disclose. How's that? So sometimes the buyer will turn in a test to the health department. Like 2-3 years ago, when sellers were like, good, it's over the legal limit, it's worth $5,000 more tomorrow, a buyer would turn in their test result to stay in the deal going, I'm turning this in or keep me in the deal. You're going to sell me that house. And some sellers paid for the decontamination because it was less than the non-refundable earnest money. So market dictates how we deal with it. I'll help you. However, I'm not going to negotiate for you, but the market dictates. Most sellers will pay anything right now to keep their buyer in. So the market just changes. So disclosure never changes. Health department, realtors do not have to disclose. Homeowners of record and certified decontamination specialists do. You are always required statewide to disclose on any real estate rental lease transaction. And some health departments, the homeowner of record is required to do the decontamination. So that can be a negotiation. I'm tapped out, I can't do it. And you just go, you're required to at this point. So I'll help you through those. It's just the different regulations by health department. Let's carry on to the next. I think seller disclosures. These are always at no. To your knowledge, is the property currently contaminated from the use, storage, or manufacturing of meth? What your clients see is Breaking Bad in my basement. That's what they read. They're always at no. It is a buyer beware state. I'm not telling you anything new. If your buyer does not test and they get stuck with the bill 5 years down the road, if you say nothing, you're legally protected if you're using Utah forms. But give them a fighting chance. That's my opinion. So those go to no. If the buyer walks and you go, I don't care, I'm tapped out. Grandma's house anyway, I'm just over the estate and I hate my brothers and sisters. But yes, most of them stay at no, gets decontaminated, and then they stay at no. Let's go to our next one. I think we're about there. Yeah, can't have a meth class without a meth picture. That's firsthand, not third. But I go, that looks like 3 decades to me, not 3 years. This stuff really is poison. And it really is in lower levels, like washing off your hands with gas when you have sticky on there. But who would ever wash off a baby's hands with sticky on it? We wouldn't. So I go, just trust our laws are written for what's safe for an infant. It totally deserves to be cleaned up, and every house doesn't need a decon, and most houses aren't even gonna have it. So it's a win for me if you can get your clients to do a test, because then I don't have to sell any more houses to people that bought their problem. Those are kind of painful ones. We'll get it. Anyway, that's all I've got. Any questions on Zoom I didn't take care of? They were really quiet. I hope they survived. Thank you guys for indulging me. I appreciate that. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So a full decontamination, my minimum is $5,000.
Hmm.
But if you ask the seller, it's not $5,000.
But you have to replace the carpet and.
Fix bubbling paint.
25,000.
It depends upon the house, right?
Mm.
So if you have to replace carpet, if your buyer walks, and now you have to make another house payment. And then the new seller asks for more concessions because the market's now becoming more and more a buyer's market. The seller might go, holy crap, that one, I have an agent, he had some rentals and they were in Provo and it was a nightmare, and the renters moved back in and decontaminated. By the time he had decontaminated these two places over a period of about 4 months, he said that cost me $60,000 on his investment property. I don't think most of them are there. If it's HVAC only, it's a cost of pre-testing, the permit, and the HVAC. And an HVAC is $2,000 for a one system house. If it's a two system house, that second system is only $1,000 because I'm already there. So it could be best case scenario, and the majority is there's nothing there. You're done. It's under the legal limit, and your buyer's like, I don't want some, I want none. Your seller could be stuck with $2,000 HVAC. We call it a deep clean because it's under the legal limit. And it's the same thing as decontamination, but we go through the HVAC system, and I can get those down to no detect almost always.